Welcome back to Panda Audiobooks. We have arrived at the next great proving ground for Jian Wushuang. In our last episode, Wushuang completed his journey through the Qiannan domain, reaching the formidable Sky Mountain Academy, a place where only true geniuses gather. Today, the competition is brutal. Chapters 24 through 28 plunge Wushuang into the cutthroat world of the academy. Here, talent is abundant, and resources must be seized, not given. Wushuang must navigate ruthless entrance exams, arrogant peers, and fierce competition for cultivation resources. His unique training and defying progress immediately draw suspicion and jealousy, forcing him to assert his dominance against established senior rivals. The fight for survival is over. Now, the fight for supremacy begins. Chapter 24 starts now. Chapter 24. Spiritual power forms the foundation. What a shock! Everyone was shocked at the unprecedented movement. The 11th move. He really achieved it. How is that possible? If they had found Jian Menge performing the 9th move of the wave superposition sword art amazing, then they could only describe Jian Wushuang's performance of the 11th move as being unbelievable. It was incredible. He was, without any doubt, incredible. He really pulled off the 11th move. In the grandstand, the esteemed elder Xianxia of Qianyuan's sword sect looked stunned. After all, there was not a single person his age capable of doing that, even in her sect. That meant his talent for sword principle was unrivaled by even those in her sect. This young man. The sword Marquis Mansion Master, Jian Wushuang, rose and stared intensely at Jian Wushuang. I'm the Mansion Master, but I didn't know his gift in sword principle had become this great. Sichu Qingyu and the others beside him were beyond shocked. Humph. The organizer of the battle, Jian Lan, snorted and turned around to face the famous experts. Perhaps you all don't know this. Though Jian Wushuang's talent in sword principle is heaven-defying, his trash that can't even gather spiritual power. Without a corresponding cultivation of spiritual power, what use is his excellent swordsmanship? Oh, you mean the boy can't gather spiritual power? Asked Sichu Qingyu and several people, their expressions turning odd. That's right. In Sword Marquis Mansion, everyone knows Jian Wushuang is trash who has been unable to gather spiritual power since he was 12. Even though he succeeded and became a warrior at last, Jian Wushuang lost the golden 4 years for a warrior to lay a solid foundation. So, learning about this, what accomplishments do you think he can achieve in the future? Sneered Jian Lan. Is this true? He just formed his spiritual power 2 months ago. What a pity! Sichu Qingyu and several excellent famous experts shook their heads and sighed. In the way of martial arts, the years from 12 to 16 were the most crucial stage, being the years of puberty. It was the best time to lay a solid foundation for cultivation. Once a person missed this golden stage, his achievements in the future would be limited. Of course, this was only applicable to ordinary practitioners, not for defiant cultivators who have cultivated a deviant cultivation like heavenly creation skill. Spiritual power is the foundation of the way of martial arts, while martial arts technique and swordsmanship are external factors. Even if he has excellent swordsmanship, he can't achieve much with weak cultivation of spiritual power. What a pity for this boy. Xianxia glanced Jian Wushuang and shook her head. Even with ordinary cultivation, he has the right to be one of our disciples like Jian Menge with his gift in sword principle. Yet the fact is, he has missed the best time for his cultivation. He has basically no chance of breaking through the spiritual sea realm. He doesn't have the qualification to be an expert. Several famous experts beside her nodded. Though Xianxia's explanation was half-hearted and sloppy, she was right. They could only shake their heads and sigh, feeling sorry for a wasted talent in sword principle. On the drill ground, many disciples of Sword Marquis Mansion had also recovered from the shock and were sighing before long. Jian Wushuang's unparalleled gift in sword principle had given everyone present a shock. But what could it prove? In the world where everyone bowed down to warriors, cultivation of spiritual power was the foundation. The 11th move. Jian Menge fixed a cold glare at the lonely figure descending down the arena. She had long known about Jian Wushuang's gift in sword principle. After her use of the 9th move of the wave superposition sword art, She thought she had finally surpassed him, even if it was just by a hair, but the gap between them was still huge. Either way, the cultivation of spiritual power formed the foundation of the way of martial arts. She vowed to crush his confidence in the second round of the battle. On the grandstand, Jian Lan commented, "Cultivation of spiritual power is the foundation to cultivating martial arts. Our disciples shouldn't neglect the cultivation of spiritual power for martial arts technique. That's simply a fool's way." Jian Lan's words resounded throughout the drill ground. It was obviously meant for Jian Wushuang. "We'll start the second round of the battle next. This round tests your cultivation of spiritual power. Please place the spiritual power gem here." Someone lifted a huge transparent gem, placing it on the arena. The middle of the gem was divided into 10 layers of microgrooves. The spiritual power gem was used to test cultivation of spiritual power, with 10 layers representing the 10 levels from the first step of the spirit path up to the exceptional spiritual sea realm. First, Jian Lin. Jian Lin remained the first participant. "Do your best to instill your spiritual power in the spiritual power gem." Jian Lan said. "Yes." Jian Lin nodded, took a deep breath, and put out his palms, displaying his ability. Soon, a cluster of spiritual power flowed into the spiritual power gem. With the infusion of spiritual power, a bright light surged from the spiritual power gem. A dazzling violet light surged from the bottom to the top of the 10 layers of the gem, putting his cultivation of spiritual power at the peak of the 6th step of the spirit path. It did not end there. A fleck of violet light lit the 7th layer. The light was still dim, but the layer was still lit. The 7th layer was lit up. The 7th step of the spirit path. Jian Lin finally broke through the 6th step of the spirit path after so long. People on the drill ground praised him, and many of them looked at Jian Lin with envy. When he withdrew his palms, Jian Lin noticed the attention on him. His mood turned better. He had been mortified ever since he was defeated by Jian Wushuang a month ago, but he had now finally recovered some of his dignity. So what if Jian Wushuang has an excellent gift in sword principle? He's probably still in the 6th step now. Jian Lin sneered at Jian Wushuang and stared at him provocatively. But when he saw Jian Wushuang, his anger flared up. "This bastard dares ignore me." Jian Lin raged. He saw how Jian Wushuang had his eyes closed as he leaned against the wall the whole time. His attitude naturally irritated Jian Lin. What he did not know was that Jian Wushuang had never concerned himself with him since the very beginning. Jian Wushuang had never cared about him, not back then and certainly not now. Chapter 25. Detection of Spiritual Power. Next, Jian Meng'er. When the lovely girl in a snow-white dress went up the platform once again, the entire drill ground was awed into silence by her beauty. She was still so cold and arrogant. Though Jian Wushuang's performance had suppressed hers, it was not enough to overshadow her brilliance. What truly impressed everyone was her heaven-defying talent for cultivation. She was a mere 16-year-old girl who had achieved the profound spiritual sea realm. This was something unprecedented in the history of Sword Marquis Mansion. Next, the detection of spiritual power would be the perfect opportunity for her to showcase her peerless talent. On the arena, Jian Meng'er inched her palms closer to the spiritual power gem, gently touching it. Everyone held their breath. Has she really achieved the profound spiritual sea realm? Those famous experts from various spheres of influence were watching with earnest attention. Though they had heard that Jian Meng'er had such an achievement, this time they would be able to witness it themselves. They would only dare to believe it if they saw it with their own eyes. A harsh violent light lit within the 10-layered spiritual power gem. The light filled the 7th layer without any suspense, then the 8th layer lit up as well. The 8th layer represented the initial spiritual sea realm. It still lit up with that dazzling violet light like the rest of the layers. Then came the 9th layer. It lit up as expected, the light just as brilliant. There were distinctions within the different layers of the spiritual power gem, and they were determined by the brightness of the violet light. Take the previous contestant, Jian Lin, as an example. When he reached the 7th step of Spirit Path, he managed to light up the 7th layer of the spiritual power gem. However, it was very dim as he was still new to the realm. But now, through the infusion of Jian Menge's spiritual power, the ninth layer had lit up with the most brilliant of lights. What did this mean? The peak. The peak of the profound spiritual sea realm. She has already achieved the profound spiritual sea realm, and she is not just a newcomer to it. All of a sudden, the drill ground was in an uproar. Good. Very good. On the grandstand, Jian Wushuang rose to his feet and applauded, excitement evident in his eyes. Jian Lan laughed heartily, unable to conceal his joy. She not only achieved the profound spiritual sea realm, but even its peak. Everyone else on the grandstand also looked exceptionally amazed. Their amazement was because, even within the same level, there was a tremendous difference between the early stages and the peak of it. It would take an ordinary warrior at least several years to accumulate enough spiritual power to achieve the profound spiritual sea realm. For some, it may take even longer. Yet Jian Menge was only 16 years old. It was already unbelievable enough that she had achieved the profound spiritual sea realm at that age, never mind reaching the peak. Everyone felt like they were in a daze. Jian Menge. On the drill ground, numerous disciples of Sword Marquis Mansion were staring at the peerless and beautiful person on the platform. Besides Jian Wushuang, none of them had any desire to compete against her. The chosen one. The most beautiful one. It was none other than Jian Menge. Bai Chong squinted and said, Xianxia, you've really accepted a great disciple. For her to achieve the peak at 16 years old, she really has an extraordinary talent for cultivation. She's not bad. Xianxia nodded, smiling. This girl does have an extraordinary talent for cultivation. Even among the many talented disciples in my Qianyuan sword sect, she's among the best. With my guidance, it won't be a problem for her to achieve gold core before turning 20. If she's willing to work hard and has good luck, perhaps another peak existence will come out of my sect. A peak existence. Everyone was stunned. Elder Shui, are you saying that Jian Menge will be able to achieve the yin-yang void realm in the future? Jian Xinhong seemed somewhat excited. No one doubted that Jian Menge was capable of forming a gold core before turning 20. However, the yin-yang void realm was truly the peak of cultivation. Even among the powerful Qianyuan sword sect, there was only a handful who had achieved it. Within Basui Commandery, there was not even one. Was there any hope for Jian Menge to achieve it in the future? With her talent, nothing is impossible as long as she's willing to work hard, Xianxia replied placidly. Though she sounded indifferent, it was difficult for the audience to calm themselves down. On the arena, Jian Menge was being watched by everyone, but her eyes were directed at Jian Wushuang. Her gaze turned chilly and she said to him, Jian Wushuang, I've warned you. I'll let you feel complete devastation in this battle today. You're not qualified to surpass me in your entire life. Can you see it now? Leaning on the corner, Jian Wushuang raised his head with his hands folded. His eyes turned as acute as electricity when they met Jian Menge's. Though no actual conversation took place, he could understand what she wanted to say through her eyes. The peak of the profound spiritual sea realm? Very good. Things will be more interesting this way. He touched his parched lips, his eyes darkening as a fire raged within him. The battle continued, yet compared to Jian Menge's results, the cultivation of spiritual power of the other disciples seemed even dimmer than a firefly's light. The last one, Jian Wushuang. It's your turn. Jian Lan called, voice cold. Leaning on the corner, Jian Wushuang rolled his eyes and slowly made his ways towards the arena. His steps were slow as he put his foot one after another, attracting everyone's attention. All eyes were on him, including the famous experts. The most eye-grabbing people in this battle were doubtlessly Jian Menge and him. In the first round of the battle earlier, Jian Wushuang shocked everyone with the 11th move of the wave superposition sword art. Though no one had any expectations for him in this second round, no one dared to belittle him anymore at the very least. He's up on the arena. Watching Jian Wushuang walk towards the platform, a smile appeared on Jian Menge's face. You achieved the peak of the 6th step of the spirit path a month ago. Now let's see how much progress you've made. Show me what you've achieved during these so-called 2 months. Chapter 26. A Frightening Battle. Jian Wushuang became the focus on the drill ground. I heard this boy achieved the peak of the 6th step as early as a month ago. I wonder if he has reached the 7th step yet. Achieving the 7th step in a month? Ridiculous. The way I see it, he's probably still at the peak of the 6th step. Though his cultivation is considered decent even among us disciples here, he's still far beneath Jian Meng'er. If he challenges her without achieving the 7th step, then he's a fool. Even if he's somehow lucky enough to achieve it, challenging her who has achieved the profound spiritual sea realm is just bringing disgrace on his own head. The other disciples started discussing among themselves in whispers. Jian Wushuang eventually stopped in front of the spiritual power gem in the arena. Looking at it, he took a deep breath. 2 months' worth of earnest cultivation. He recalled the past 2 months where he dared not even spend a minute relaxing. He stayed in the cultivating room and endured the massive pressure, continuously turning the torment into something he could be proud of. In the gladiator arena, he risked his life to join the challenge so he could get his hands on all the first-class spirit cultivating pills he needed. In Nine Wolves Mountain, he fought against the bloody lion and absorbed a whole pool of primordial spiritual liquid. He had spent 2 months frantically cultivating, and now it was time to show them all his hard work. Everyone looks down on me. They all think I'm overreaching to challenge Jian Meng'er. In that case, you all better open your eyes wide and watch carefully. With a heat gleamed in his eyes, he touched the spiritual power gem with his hands. Using heavenly creation skill, the spiritual power began to pour out from within. Buzz! A dazzling violet light emerged from the spiritual power gem almost instantaneously. The 6th level of the 10-layered spiritual power gem lit up after Jian Wushuang's spiritual power flowed into it. The same brilliant light marked the 7th step of the spirit path. The 7th layer lit up. The 7th step of the spirit path. He actually achieved it. Cries of surprises resounded throughout the drill ground. Amidst the crowd was Jian Lin, who had gone pale. This time, he had reached the 7th step of the spirit path as well and thought he had finally caught up to Jian Wushuang. The constant flow of Jian Wushuang's spiritual power sparked the violet light that filled the 7th layer of the spiritual power gem, which was truly glaring. And it was still going. After the 7th layer, the violet light instantly lit up the 8th. The 8th level. Jian Lin's eyes widened in shock. The 8th layer represented the initial spiritual sea realm. The bright violet light was still going, inching towards the 9th layer. It's just as I thought. The spiritual power gem tests the cultivation of spiritual power based on its force. Though I haven't achieved the spiritual sea realm yet, I've reached the peak 8th heaven of the divine path in the heavenly creation skill. That's equivalent to the peak of the initial spiritual sea realm. The strength of the heavenly creation skill is far stronger than the similar ones. And the 9th level, Jian Wushuang's gaze turned sharp and he shouted, "Light it up!" Buzz! Light abruptly filled the 9th layer of the spiritual power gem. That meant the layer that represented the profound spiritual sea realm was lit. Impossible! On the arena, Jian Lan was the first to make noise. There was no trace of any smugness on his face, only a distorted expression that looked almost mad. Jian Lan, earlier you said this boy hadn't even gathered his spiritual power 2 months ago, said Sichu Qingyu, looking directly at him. Aye. Jian Lan could not find any words to retort. The 9th layer. How's that possible? Jian Xinhong's eyes were round. The profound spiritual sea realm. He actually achieved the profound spiritual sea realm? How's that possible? It must be a lie. A lie. It's completely impossible. 2 months ago, he couldn't even gather spiritual power. Everyone had gone mad. The whole drill ground had completely gone mad. The 9th level. There was finally a change in Jian Meng'er's arrogant expression that she had maintained on her beautiful face since the beginning of the competition. An unprecedented fearful expression crept onto her face. Fright. Yes, even Jian Meng'er was shocked. She was a peerless genius who had started her cultivation at the age of 12. For years since then, she had achieved the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm. Her achievement was remarkable. How could Jian Wushuang compare? Everyone knew Jian Wushuang was once trash who could not even gather spiritual power. Everyone knew he was just an ordinary man without a trace of spiritual power 2 months ago. Everyone thought him wanting to challenge her today was the world's biggest joke. But now, who dared to laugh at him whose spiritual power gem had lit up the 9th layer, representing the profound spiritual sea realm? Who dared to say Jian Wushuang did not qualify to challenge her? If people had found Jian Wushuang lamentable after he had surprisingly pulled off the 11th move of the wave superposition sword art in the first round, then the cultivation of spiritual power he had just presented was truly shocking. Genius. Monster. These 2 words inevitably appeared in everyone's minds. Jian Meng'er started cultivating at 12 and achieved the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm at merely 16. She could already be considered a peerless talent. Yet Jian Wushuang had only spent 2 months to go from an ordinary person to someone in the profound spiritual sea realm. What was he if not a monster? And just then, the person who everyone regarded as a monster had slowly withdrawn his palm. With his dark pupils, he swept everyone with his gaze, carrying a hint of disdain. Standing high up on the arena, Jian Wushuang looked down upon the disciples of Sword Marquis Mansion. Each of them who met his eyes could not help bowing their heads. On the entire drill ground, there was only one person who dared to meet his gaze, all while carrying a trace of stubbornness. It was Jian Meng'er. Jian Wushuang's gaze finally landed on her. There was no need for any words. In that moment, their burning battle intent to fight had risen to the surface. Jian Meng'er, get the F***CK up here. His cold growl was akin to a thunderbolt, resonating through heaven and earth. The entire drill ground instantly became ablaze with excitement. Chapter 27. Summit Battle. Jian Meng'er, get the F***CK up here. A chilly shrill cry echoed, resounding through the drill ground for a long time. A beautiful girl in a long, snow-white robe raised her head, promptly leaping onto the stage with one step. Standing on the stage, less than 10 meters away from each other, 2 figures were on a warpath. There was an intense feeling of confrontation that you do not sense any other time. The long sword on Jian Wushuang's back was removed from the sheath and a vibration of sword essence like the rolling tide radiated from it. As the cold sword edge directly pointed at Jian Meng'er, without the slightest trace of emotion, Jian Wushuang coldly said, "As I said 2 months ago, I have come to find you today. The fight between us is inevitable. It had to come to an end." Jian Meng'er's face was stone cold as she stood there with her snow-white robe blowing. The power of her peak of the profound spiritual sea realm was completely released. Jian Wushuang, I don't know how you increased your strength in just 2 months. Anyway, I still believe that the winner takes all. Since you are so desperate to fight with me, then bring it on. The brief talk led the atmosphere to an elevated level immediately. Oh, I see. There was an uproar of excitement and expectation rising in the area around the drill ground. It seemed that the disciples of Sword Marquis Mansion were on the brink of madness, waiting to witness how things would unfold. This would be an eye-catching duel. What an exciting turn of events. It was universally acknowledged that a 16-year-old teenager, considered to be a super genius, top of the list, had reached the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm. The other one who was buried in oblivion, amazed people with their spiritual power, on par with the profound spiritual sea realm, which was acquired within 2 months. The battle between them. Even those famous experts among the audience were looking forward to watching the fight between them. It was the summit battle between 2 talents. In fact, the people who lived in Sword Marquis Mansion thought Jian Wushuang's challenge to Jian Meng'er was a joke and brought disgrace on his own head. Now, after 2 rounds of battle, no one dared to say it was wishful thinking. According to the sword principle, someone who cultivated the wave superposition sword art to the 11th move was definitely a genius. According to the cultivation of spiritual power, he lit up the 9th level of the spiritual power gem, also equivalent to the profound spiritual sea realm. So they were neck and neck in this battle. He had the qualification to challenge Jian Meng'er. In addition, it was hard to say who would be the victor. Ladies and gentlemen, you see these 2. Who's better than the other? Bai Chong asked with a smile. It is hard to say. Situ Qingyu spoke first. In cultivation of spiritual power, Jian Meng'er had reached the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm, which was slightly better than Jian Wushuang. In regards to swordsmanship, Jian Wushuang gained the upper hand. They were well matched, making it hard to judge their true strength. I agree. Yi Xiu nodded his head. Although cultivation of spiritual power is a fundamental step in the process of practicing martial arts, the strength of martial arts technique is an important factor that could also determine the outcome, considering the small disparity in their cultivation. By virtue of their swordsmanship, Jian Wushuang and Jian Meng'er could totally brawl with each other, and the outcome will be unpredictable. Shui Hanshin, what do you think? Bai Chong suddenly looked at her, beside him. I bet Meng'er will win. Shui Hanshin said following. Oh, you are confident you are in your disciple? Bai Chong said with the corner of his lip raised. Bai Chong, did you just notice? Shui Hanshin glanced at Bai Chong, laughing as she said, that little guy called Jian Wushuang, although he lit up the spiritual power gem during the detection of spiritual power, I could see that he barely reached it. So I am sure that he hasn't reached the profound spiritual sea realm. I think his cultivation is between the peak of the initial spiritual sea realm and the profound spiritual sea realm. Indeed. Bai Chong just noticed this, nodding. Moreover, we all know that this little guy had not gathered spiritual power 2 months ago. Now, 2 months have passed, his spiritual cultivation has unexpectedly increased so much, so I think there are bound to be many external factors. Shui Hanshin said plainly. For example, regardless of the consequences, he swallowed pills or treasures to enhance his cultivation by force. But the enhancement would lead him to collapse radically. Not only is his chance of becoming an expert in the future very slim, he also won't be able to utilize 100% of his strength. His performance will be at a mere 20% or 30% at best. People in the spectators stand frowned upon hearing these words. Indeed, they also thought of this possibility. After all, it was inconceivable that his cultivation of spiritual power increased so quickly. It made no sense to say that he did not use some pills or natural treasures. However, they did not know that Jian Wushuang was a deviant cultivator. Therefore, his training could not be judged by common sense. Of course, apart from these two things, the most important part is that I have absolute confidence in my disciple. I know my disciple better than anyone else. It is impossible to find a talent of the same age who can beat my disciple in Sword Marquis Mansion, Shui Hanshin said nonchalantly with a look of absolute confidence. It is really subjective, but I rather think the little guy called Jian Wushuang could win. Bai Chong said and laughed. Since Mr. Bai Chong thinks so, let's wait and see. Shui Xinhan said with an indifferent smile. Look, these two little guys are fighting with each other. Yi Xiu said abruptly from the spectators' stand. Everyone instantaneously turned their eyes to the stage. Jian Meng'er was the first to attack. As a trace of killing intent burst out from Triple Kill Sword as Jian Meng'er took a huge step and swung the long sword with an irresistible force. Sword tide. When the long sword suddenly slashed out, it was like the rolling tide sweeping over the area. Sword tide was the most terrifying move of the ceaseless waterflow sword art, and its sweeping wave was the essence of this trick. Under normal circumstances, this move, if mastered to the profound level, could produce 6 layers. But at this moment, Jian Meng'er's wave swept out with 8 layers. It's ridiculous. Jian Wushuang chuckled and caught the waves with his sword, a very common sword, dissolving the 8 layers of sword essence without any effort when he touched them by taking advantage of their force. Then he made a huge stride toward his opponent. Whoosh! A tide like sword light was released, creating waves in the area. Jian Wushuang also performed the move Sword Tide. But when the sword art was performed, the rolling waves of sword essence burst out with 12 layers in an instant. Chapter 28. Superior Swordsmanship. Amazing! One stroke was enough to dispel her sword art? How did he do that? His sword arts are so strong. The first fight between the two brought about bursts of exclamations throughout the drill ground. Jian Wushuang's understanding of swordsmanship is much better than we ever imagined. The famous experts on the stands also felt amazed. They all had broader horizons. Naturally, They could see that Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship was extraordinary. The sword stroke he displayed before seemed simple, but in fact, it required perfect use of the sword art's power as well as a high comprehension of basic swordsmanship. Next, Jian Wushuang used the same sword tide and released 12 layers of sword essence, which astonished everyone. After all, Jian Meng'er tried her best but only brought about 8 layers of sword essence. This tremendous difference immediately demonstrated the big gap between their skills. Fuck off! After an effeminate shout, Jian Meng'er attacked straight ahead indignantly, with her towering long sword. This simple action, carrying an incomparably strong power, was filled with an awe-inspiring righteousness. A magnificent spiritual power gathered together and then rushed out all at once, colliding with the onrushing sword essence wave released by Jian Wushuang. Chen Yuan's sword skill. While watching from the stands, Bai Chong's pupils immediately shrank and he cast a glance at Shui Hanshin, then whispered, "No wonder you're so confident. Your baby disciple has already practiced Chen Yuan's sword skills." Shui Hanshin smiled faintly but stayed silent. Chen Yuan's sword skill, the supreme sword art that was practiced in Chen Yuan's sword sect, was far stronger than various sword arts in Sword Marquis Mansion. The degree of strength of cultivation level represented the degree of pureness, precision, and momentum of its spiritual power. The overall strength of Jian Meng'er, who practiced the Chen Yuan sword skill, was definitely far stronger than ordinary people at the peak of the profound spiritual sea realm. That's why Jian Meng'er could overcome 20 movements when she competed with the 4 great elders of Sword Pavilion by virtue of the profound spiritual sea realm. The 12 waves of sword essence were scattered Jian Meng'er's sword strike, then streaks of sword shadow burst out from one of Jian Meng'er's hands. Each sword was startlingly fast. Aurora sword art. Jian Wushuang slightly raised the corners of his mouth, followed by a sudden cold voice. "I told you before, even though the Aurora sword art pursues extreme speed, blindly increasing your speed will affect the coordination and coherence between the sword arts. But obviously, you didn't take my advice. Not to mention that your sword art. It's too slow. Too slow." These words resounded on the drill ground and immediately made all of the disciples of Marquis's mansion stunned. After all, in their view, Jian Meng'er's sword art was fast enough. They were too fast to be seen with the naked eye. In only an instant, a series of sword shadows rushed out. Dozens of sword shadows were displayed by her, but Jian Wushuang withstood them all. Too slow. Too slow. Jian Wushuang resisted the swords while shaking his head at the same time. It was clear that he could easily withstand these swords. Jian Meng'er bit the bullet and tried her best to increase the speed. However, even though she displayed the Aurora sword art with her full power, she couldn't even touch Jian Wushuang's clothes. "I'll show you the real Aurora sword art now," Jian Wushuang said coldly. After saying that, Shua, an awesome sword shadow, much faster than that of Jian Meng'er, rushed out at once. They were quick like lightning, and the consecutive sword strikes were coordinated and coherent. Too fast. Oh my God! Lots of cheering erupted on the drill ground. They felt amazed by the speedy swordsmanship of Jian Meng'er. As for Jian Wushuang's speed with the Aurora sword art, they truly felt it was unbelievable. It was so fast that people couldn't see it clearly. How can it be so fast? Jian Meng'er was greatly frightened. Seeing the overlapping sword shadows sweeping towards her like lightning, she immediately used the boulder sword art, which was a special defensive sword art among the 18 first-class sword arts of Sword Pavilion, to resist with her all strength. Clang! 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 After many successive clashes, Jian Meng'er was obviously flustered. Jian Wushuang's sword art was so fast that she couldn't withstand them, and now she was forced into an embarrassing situation. After the sword light radiated for only a few moments, the sword art that was falling like torrential rain suddenly stopped. 18 breaths. Forced to the edge of the tower, Jian Meng'er stared in front of her. At Jian Wushuang. She calculated the breaths while she tried to resist Jian Wushuang's sword art. After Jian Wushuang finished the entire Aurora sword art, it was only 18 breaths. While she needed at least 37 breaths to display the whole sword art. This meant that Jian Wushuang's speed with this sword art was more than twice as fast as her, and it was obvious that Jian Wushuang displayed it more coherently and with more coordination. It was too fast for her to resist. Jian Meng'er took a glance at the sleeve of her robe. 2 holes from a sword edge could be seen clearly, exposing her white skin, which made her feel shameful. Bastard! With an angry shout, Jian Meng'er attacked him directly with triple kill sword, fiercely. Drifting Snow Sword Art. One of the 18 first-class sword arts sword pavilion. It's ridiculous. Jian Wushuang sneered, easily facing this sword art. Then he used the drifting snow sword art in a more overbearing and aggressive manner. Just as the old saying goes, serve them with the same sauce. No matter what sword art Jian Meng'er displayed, Jian Wushuang resisted it easily at first and then returned it in a tougher, more mature, and perfect manner. Superior swordsmanship. He completely surpassed her in sword arts. Jian Meng'er's swordsmanship was already good enough for her to reach the profound level in all 18 first-class sword arts of Sword Pavilion. But now, in front of Jian Wushuang, her sword arts were just like tricks played by little children. The gap was so big. The gap of swordsmanship between the two was even bigger than we expected. Looking down, Sichu Qingyu solemnly said, Jian Meng'er has good swordsmanship, but Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship is much better. It's hard to imagine that a 16-year-old boy could have such impressive swordsmanship. Jian Xinhong, in Sword Marquis Mansion, are you the only person who has better swordsmanship than this little guy? Yi Xiu looked toward Jian Xinhong. As the Sword Marquis Mansion Master, Jian Xinhong had a full understanding of the situation regarding Sword Marquis Mansion. Hearing Yi Xiu's words at this moment, he couldn't help nodding in agreement. As for swordsmanship, merely in Sword Marquis Mansion, he was the only one that was better than Jian Wushuang. And with that shocking display of rapid cultivation, we conclude Chapter 28. Wushuang has not only successfully entered the academy but has already begun to disrupt the established order. His progress, fueled by the heavenly creation skill, is alarming the elders and inciting burning jealousy among his peers. The peaceful integration is over. Conflict is inevitable. He has quickly become the Academy's newest prodigy, and the title comes with a dangerous target on his back. Join us next time for chapters 29, 30, 31, and 32, where Wushuang faces a coordinated attack from his new rivals, potentially leading to his first deadly trial within the Academy walls. Thank you for listening to Panda Audiobooks. If you are ready for the bloodshed, please subscribe and hit that notification bell.